I'm Amy Thurlow, and I'm a member of the Education Council. And it is my great pleasure to introduce our presenters today. Just before we get to individual presenters, by way of history, this is our third annual research presentation at the CPRS National Conference. And this session started as an idea on the Education Council and part of our Educators Roundtable to try and raise the profile of academic research and educational research in public relations and communications management, and to really work to make connections between researchers and practitioners so that we're aware of what's being done in the field, what advances being made, and the body of knowledge that's available to practitioners and educators in public relations and communications management. We've explored, I will say, 3 different formats with our research presentations over the years, and we're still exploring what will be the most useful way to connect with practitioners at the conference and to profile educators. In previous years, you may recall, we had a poster presentation sort of in the hallway format where we had a number of posters and people milled through and on their own time looked at the posters. Last year, we had a number of presenters do very short presentations, just sort of broad strokes of their research. And this year, we decided to go with a format where we chose just 2 presentations from the submissions that we received. They go through a peer review process, and these 2 presentations were awarded the opportunity to present, and we're giving each presenter a little more time this year so that we can really get some in-depth look into their analysis and background of their research. So you let us know how you like the format of a little bit more in-depth on a smaller number of presentations, and as we go forward, we'll be looking at how that works for people and how to maybe explore or expand our sessions in future. So on that note, we have 2 presenters today. Dr. Terry Flynn from McMaster University will be our first presenter, and his presentation is "Do They Have What It Takes? An Analysis of Competencies, Skills, and Knowledge of Canadian Public Relations Practitioners." And Susan M. is doing a presentation on best practices for media relations in a shifting world, which sounds like a very interesting and timely topic for sure. Just before I introduce Terry, we're excited also because his presentation has received support from the Communications and Public Relations Foundation. And for those of you who are not familiar with the foundation, it's an organization that's dedicated to advancing the field of public relations and communications management through education and research. So 2 years ago, I'm looking at Barbara Sheffield, our executive director is here in the audience too. We decided that we have been working for years funding scholarships and research grants to students. And about 2 years ago, we decided, we really want to expand the impact that we're having in terms of developing public relations research and making it accessible to practitioners and connecting with the academic community. So we've developed an RFP process and a research funding process, and I'm happy to say that Dr. Flynn and his team from McMaster is the first recipient of that funding research. So we from the foundation are very proud to be able to see that here at the conference as well. So no pressure, but.
And the second award will be made in August, September.
That's right. Yes, we have an RFP out and another award coming. So certainly feeling like a lot of momentum and groundwork being done there in terms of connecting practitioners and research, which fits with this session perfectly. So without further ado, Terry.
Great, thank you. Now we are videotaping these presentations for use by the foundation, actually, so that they can post it on their website. But also I think it's critical that part of research is, and especially a lot of funded agencies now want to know what you're doing to mobilize the knowledge. How are you going to transmit the knowledge to people that might not be in this presentation? So that's how we're going to do it. So Sarah Perrin from our program is here videotaping. So if you have any problems about being seen, if any of the police are looking for you, then you might just want to leave now. But let me just get this ready. You also have a copy of the poster that we presented, and as Susan and I found out, it probably takes more work than doing this PowerPoint presentation to put that poster together. So please make use of it and really enjoy it. And because we were both working on it at the same time, sharing frustrations with different kinds of programs, software that we were using as well. So I just want to mention that the Communications and Public Relations Foundation did supply the funding for this research. It's still ongoing. We're reporting 50% of the research that we've conducted to date. So I'm very pleased with that, and the foundation's work is critical. And if you think of the work that has been done, the research in the field of public relations, the Grunick Excellence Study was funded by the IBC Foundation, $400,000. So, you know, if you could just pass the hat around, maybe we could collect some more for that. But the foundation is very critical for what we do. And the fact that it's peer-reviewed also helps academics to say that this is a worthy process for us in terms of our tenured process. It was around this time last year, in fact I think it was due June 15th that the submission was. So we gathered a research team at McMaster that includes both Alex Sevigny and Dr. Philip Savage that are co-investigators, and then we have a number of research students both at the graduate level and the undergraduate level. This is also good because our universities are trying to figure out how, other than the tri-council funding being SHRC and NSERC and CIHR. So those are the traditional funding bodies. But now they're looking at how do we get other sources of revenue in to help with research. So this research grant actually helped us in our department figure out how we do that. So it was instrumental for us. And the funds that were used for this project allowed us to not only come and travel here, but actually hire graduate students. And I think that's an important part so that they get a critical part of it. So the purpose of the study is to really understand what the field possesses, to what degree they have certain levels of competency, skills, and knowledge. How do they marry in with 21st century competency skills? Because we can't look at ourselves just in isolation, but to look at ourselves within the disciplines that we work within. And then to understand what kind of gaps, if there are any, exist between what's the ideal and where the practice is right now. So what we'll share with you today really is the first two phases of this project. We've conducted a literature review, quite a comprehensive literature review. We've done a content analysis of job postings to see, you know, because that's the reality. You know, you could do all this theory and literature and you know, pathways that we do, but what's the profession really hiring? Depth interviews with hiring managers to again validate where are they doing, because job ads are one thing and you can say certain things, but what are the other criteria that they're looking at? And then we're going to do an online survey of practitioners. We're going to benchmark that against some studies that have been published in the Anglosphere. And then we're going to try to understand what the implications for the professions here are in Canada. As I said, the first two are completed. We're in field now with with hiring managers. So if you know anybody that does a lot of hiring at all levels, then please put them in touch with us, because we want to get to them, do face-to-face interviews with them or one-on-one interviews. And then in the fall we'll start an online survey of practitioners. So literature review, this is like, most people just die when you say this. Like, why would you ever want to do a literature review? And because it allows us to kind of gather a state of the practice. What are people saying in it? Not just in our own, but what are organizations really talking about? And when I talk about big organizations, people like the OECD, you know, what are they looking at, and how do we deal with that? And are there certain competencies that 21st century employees need to have that 20th century like us didn't have to have? And I put this in. This was a competency in the 20th century. How to develop black and white photos. Guess what? You don't need that anymore, right? No, how to use a buggy whip from the 19th century. And then are there any specific competencies, skills, and knowledge within the profession that, you know, the pathway document did a lot of work to kind of gather that, but are they being written about in a regular basis? What we did find is that these three words are thrown about quite interchangeably. There's a lot of confusion beyond them. And even the OECD in the report said, you know, that competency is more than just knowledge and skills. It's behavior, it's sort of psychosocial in terms of what they are. But Anne Gregory, who's the actually incoming chair of the Global Alliance, she's at Leeds University, I think, in the UK, I think really set it out and said, knowledge is what do they need to know? Skills are what do they need to do, and competencies are what's the behavior that we really require. So I think that really helped in terms of solidifying that level of discussion that we can have, because it's like goals and objectives. Whenever you hear people talk about them, everybody's even mixed on that. So after this exhaustive literature review that I think it's about 60 pages in length, here are the 21st century skills that these are the recognized skills that 21st century employees are required or suggested to have. No specific ordering, they're not rank ordered in any way, but they came out as the most obvious in terms of the research. So information process, how do we make sense of all the information that we get today? How do we manage it? And not just from a technical standpoint, but from a psychological perspective as well. Because how are you making sense of the 3,200 emails that you get from that? The competency in terms of communication skills. That they're looking for people that have good communication skills, and that means both from a presentation standpoint, writing standpoint as well. They're looking at people who can work well in teams, that can collaborate well. That they have a knowledge of ICTs, critically important today, that they're innovative, they're flexible, and then they have this level of problem solving and critical thinking. So that's the macro level global skills. Didn't matter where you work, managers are looking for, do you have these kind of competency? And when we go to the hiring managers, we're going to ask them, in fact, to rate these, how important they are to that particular person. Because they're not just hiring a public relations person, they're hiring a person that's going to help contribute to the organization goals and objectives. From the public relations competency, we do in fact see some similarities. So yes, they want ICT competencies, because now as social media starts to begin to overwhelm and develop. Cultural competencies, which are not on the global list, which is interesting. And what they're saying is that, and not just globally culture specific to certain audiences and community stakeholder groups as well. Ethics, we had a good conversation here just in the educator roundtable that this is a competency that is being hired for. And then there's this group of business level skills, competencies, and knowledge that is now starting to be shown that probably 10 years ago would not have been there. But that discussion about if we're taking this to this next level of management, then you need to understand strategic planning, you have to understand analytics as well. And then traditional crisis management and relationship building. So what does it mean? Well, employers are looking for more general transferable skills. So we don't want specialists just in social media, we want people that can be able to do things. And it reminded me when I was writing this up that when I was about 15, I had a job at a grocery store, and I was doing all these stupid jobs, and I went to the guy and I said, I want to work in the dairy section. That's where I want to work. He said, no, I want you to be my jack of all trades. And I hated that. But that's a generalist. I mean, that's what people are looking for. We want people who are generalists rather than specialists in that way. And then, of course, the studies continue to show the priority of, and we again had this conversation this morning, the importance of written and verbal communications and how that is a growing concern within the literature. Within this technology, why is this growing more important, social media, but this sense of why we're even doing this video. And to be able to use that as a new platform to be able to communicate. And what does that mean? You have to have that video editing. It's not just a matter of running a camera, but you have to be able to use the software and creating that content and then optimizing it to be able to be found as well. And then even this is a competency that the UIB in the US have identified in their programming as well. Information management, knowledge of distribution channels, and technology and literacy as a growing one. Now, so that was the literature review. Now we wanted to see what's happening in reality. So we asked CPRS for access to job postings over the last 3 years. We also got some from IBC, a lot from LinkedIn as well. So we had a total population of around 650 potential job postings that we then sampled 280 from. And then our researchers went and identified 28 different variables to code from. And that was, again, location, job title, responsibilities, skills, salary if reported, education as well. And then we had 3 coders do it, and it's important when you do this kind of testing that there's inter-coder reliability so that they were in fact coding those right variables correctly. And after a couple of rounds, we did in fact have a high level of inter-coder reliability. So what were the preliminary results? Total mentions, well, the skill, most important, 35% said writing, right? There will be a typo probably, if you just make sure, because these were actually more, these were the latest ones that were just sent to me, so just make that change. So 35% said writing, strategic planning, about 20% media relations, and then project management. So these are the top 5 skills out of all those 200 and some job postings that we looked at that people are hiring for as you go through. In terms of responsibility, and again, different in terms of skill, these are the basic skills. Here's now becomes the responsibility that they want to, that 28%, nearly 30% said that they will have a responsibility in the communication strategy area. And then the strategic planning. So if you look at that, nearly 50%, more than 50, 52% said, you know, there's some level of strategic planning management within the responsibilities they would have. Less on the traditional, that should be 14%, not 114%, sorry. Design and media. So, you know, again, tactical or technical here, more strategic or more management on a higher level as well. Results in terms of the education, 60% for bachelor's was not a big surprise. 1% said high school. That would be interesting. I'd like to sort of go back. But 17% said no, they didn't list specific educational requirements, which is interesting. What kind of discipline within that? Well, 44% said specifically mentioned communication, marketing and public relations around the same. And again, 23% said no. Nothing. This should worry the people next door. 92% did not mention any kind of accreditation. And the fact that now, so here's where we have to be careful about the sample, right? So we're pulling from IBC sampling. There's a higher level mention of accreditation within IBC postings than even our CPRS one as well. Because the IBC accredited numbers are far less than CPRS accreditation numbers, just in terms of raw numbers as well. So, what are the conclusions? Well, the good news is that the pathways document, there's strong alignment between the curriculum that was developed, curriculum and suggestions developed, and the competency, skills, and knowledge of the study had found. So that's a good validation of what we've gone out, and again, a validation of in fact, the recognition programs as well. And if educational institutions in fact enact the pathways, that they're going to increase the competency, skills, and knowledge. And again, what will test that and what will validate for us with that is the PRK examination. They're good evaluative methods, but they really don't test measures of competencies in terms of ICT skills or something. So we're not answering in that respect. Hold on, it went way back. Focus on traditional, so they're still focusing on traditional skills that are required, writing, media relations, but there is a higher and growing number in terms of that higher level of strategic competency. But there is a weak alignment in terms of the skills and responsibilities identified here and in the literature. So it'll be interesting in this next line to see, because job postings, they don't tell it all. You know, what are the kind of intangible assets that they're not advertising for, that they are in fact interviewing for and hiring for as well. So next steps, that we'll process this summer and in the fall, and then we will continue to present at different conferences. First phase of literature review will be submitted to the Canadian Journal of Communication for publication, and then our target publication for the content analysis by itself is public relations review, and then we're going to post this on CPRS, Foundation, and our websites as well for knowledge mobilization. And that's it. So, questions? Yes, Heather.
So, just taking it in quickly, is this a transition from a tactical way to represent our profession to now it's more of a strategic profession? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think there's evidence that there is movement. There's more recognition of this, the importance of communication strategy, corporate strategic planning in the advertised post. What we haven't done here is broken down by level, right? So there's a level, so I'm sure that junior posts have more of the traditional technical creative requirements that they're looking for, and the higher level posts are looking at more of the strategic or strategic planning as well.
Whereas before, all of them
Right.
had more of the
Right. So now we're seeing a distinction in terms of what that is. Yeah, Angela.
An example too, so they're saying that is the generalist view that seem to come through as opposed to specialists.
Yeah, they're not, I mean, some ads spoke specifically, but when you look at them all together, 300 together, there's a clump of, we need to have these requisite level of competency, skills, and knowledge. And then they'll hire specifically accordingly to the industry, right? So we didn't include here in terms of what the industry was, but there's lots of data. Yeah, Amy?
So when you were selecting the job postings, did you allow the posting institution to designate that it was a public relations job? Like if it was on CPRS or IABC? Or how much PR had to be in the job before it was?
No, we just took the post, with the available posts from those 3 areas, and then we just selected from that, randomly selected from that. So we didn't select only jobs that said public relations or communication management, but if it was a marketing job solely, they would have been tossed out. And so it had to be still within that realm. Yeah, Don.
Were the posts that you looked at English only?
They were English only, yes.
So it could be interesting to see.
It could be. It could be.
Existed
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
And then the second question is, there was a time where there was a lot of language around change management skills.
Yeah.
In recruitment. Did you notice? any-
None. Didn't come up even on a blip. Change management. Yeah. Yeah.
Become more of a technology term,
Yeah.
believe it or not.
Yeah. Alex?
Someone who just did the accreditation process recently. Why do you think accreditation is not on the radar?
That's a $64,000 question. It's interesting. I mean, it would be interesting to go back and look at why IBC had, I mean, they're statistically the same. There's no difference between 4% and 3% really. But at the same time, I think in their job postings, maybe they spend more time with people posting on their website, making sure that they have accreditation in their job description than probably we do. You know, I don't think, I don't know for sure, but if it's a payable job posting that's relative to public relations communication management, it probably goes on the CPRS website. And probably nobody spends any time with the person who's posting and saying, well, what about accreditation? To what degree? And maybe that's something that's one way of really pushing that, to saying, look, if you want to be on our website, then what you should be doing is putting, you know, ABC or APR accreditation in that job posting. Yeah, Barbara?
They also speak to the fact that both those organizations need to do more in communicating about the value of the designation.
Yeah, yeah.
So that may be something that can, at the end of this, can be referred to both organizations.
Yeah. No, you know, I don't think we do enough. I don't think we spend enough time or effort in doing that. And it would be interesting just to have a conversation with those people that are posting those jobs to say, and well, we'll do that. We'll add that to the hiring manager. To what degree do you post, and why not? And I think we'll find out pretty clearly why, because it has no perceived value potentially. Yeah. Sandra.
You're going to be comparing your findings to findings from New Zealand and
Yeah.
the UK
Benchmark.
and Europe. What about the US?
I actually think we have a lot more similarity with those 3 other companies than the US, or countries than the US. I mean, the US is far more advanced in everything else that they do. Even in this field, I mean, we are in our research phases still very foundational. And those are the same with Australia, New Zealand, and in the UK. And probably we're just in a better place, I think, to be able to compare the skills and what we do and how we think about public relations than the Americans do. I mean, there's a real different cultural perspective in terms of how public relations is practiced in the US than here, and there's probably a lot more similarities between how we do it and how Australians, New Zealanders, and the UK do it. And it might be, you know, part not just culture, but style of government. When most of the people that practice public relations in Canada work for governments, that whole issue of public interest goes back to that focus as well. Yeah.
So it's just more of a comment. It'd be interesting to see what they were looking for and then what they got.
Yeah.
Because you know how often you go talking to a client and this is what they think they want you, but they end up with your expertise coming in and what they end up getting. And it'd be really interesting. Like even in interviews, I know even students have gone in and had an interview, and then when they said that they were a member of either IEC or CPRS, the hiring manager was impressed. It wasn't part of what they were looking for, but that was the differentiator.
Yeah.
I'm very involved in the profession. Oh, okay. And that kind of pushed them up, but it wasn't something that was being looked for innately.
Cool.
You know, interesting to see.
So if you know anybody that is that does a lot of hiring, please send me an email with their name, and we're going to reach out, and we're looking at across the country as well. For this one, for these two phases, they will be bilingual as well. So the survey will be, the online survey will be French and English, and we have some researchers that can interview in French as well to that. Thank you. Thank you.